Good? Am I centered? Okay, good morning. We are on Hilchos Megillah, Tav Reish Tzadi, and we're going to start today with Seif Tet. Okay, if we get to the end, we will do a Purim Meshulash is over 3 days. So there's a halacha, it'll be 3 days in a row of a halacha of Purim Meshulash. We'll see if we get there. Okay, for this year. So Tet. Haita ktuva targum o belashon acheres milashano ha'akum. So if your Megillah is written in any language, whether it's Aramaic or any other language, Goyish language, doesn't matter. Lo yatzei yedei chovato b'kriyata ela hamakir oto halashon bilvad. So you could be yotzei through it, only the person who understands that language. Only a person who understands. So if you only understand English, and the whole Megillah is written in the correct English, and it's written in English, and you can understand it and read it in English, you could be yotzei. Aval, but we'll see, that's not so practical. Aval, imaita ktuba bichtav ivri ukira aramit la'arami. But if you had a kosher Megillah, it's written in Hebrew. I mean, a kosher Megillah could be written in any language you just said, but the normal Megillah that you're going to find from a kosher sofer is obviously going to only be in Hebrew. Now you read it and you know Aramaic, and you read it to someone who only knows Aramaic, or while you're reading it, your brain and your eyes are reading the words in Hebrew, but you're verbally pronouncing every word in the translation into, let's say, English or Aramaic, depending, right, who you're reading it for, or for yourself. Lo yatsa, you're not yotzei, because the language that it's written and the language that you're reading must be the same. Because if not, really what's going on, shenimtza ze korei al peh. Really, that is the definition of reading by heart. Right? V'kevan shelo yatsa hakorei yedei chovato lo yatsa hashomea mimeno. So the one who's reading is not going to be yotzei, and the one who's listening is also not going to be yotzei. Right? If you're listening to someone else, you can only be yotzei if the person who is reading it correctly. And the one who's reading it, well, he's translating in his brain, and that has the din of korei al peh, by heart. Okay. Okay, let's see, where are we? Yeah, okay. The Bir Halacha has an interesting case. Again, it's not really Lamaisa, but he says if you are going to have a kosher Megillah written in a different language, so the halacha of mukafas kavil does not apply to a non-Hebrew Megillah. Again, not really Lamaisa, but that just means mukafas kavil means the entire letter does not have to be surrounded by clean cloth. It could even go to the end. You could be writing till the end of the line and hit the end. Anyways, Haga. Aval ein lachosh be'ez ktav ktuba. Now it doesn't matter what, how it's written. If it's cursive, script, or whatever kind of block, however it's written, that doesn't matter. Okay. And of course, we all know the minhag in Klal Yisrael is clearly that we only read it in Lashon HaKodesh, and it's only written in Lashon HaKodesh, which is Hebrew, and that's practically the minhag, so that everybody could certainly be yotzei the mitzvah. Because otherwise, there's all kinds of issues and details and practicalities that doesn't work. In particular, let's read the next one, and you'll see. Yud. Seif Yod. Mi sheyodea la'az ve'yodea ashurit. What happens if the person reading, he knows both? He knows, let's say, English, and he knows Hebrew. Eino yotzei b'la'az. It's impossible to be yotzei b'la'az. That was the takana of Chazal. If you know Hebrew, you must read it in Hebrew. Even if the Megillah is all written in correct English, it's not going to work. V'yesh omrim sheyotzei. And some say, no, you are going to be yotzei. You could still be yotzei. That's a machloket. And stam v'yesh omrim says clearly we would paskin lechatchila with the stam, And that's essentially one of the main reasons why it's practically always needs to be written and read in Hebrew for the vast majority of situations, and so that everybody in the room can be Yotzei. Because otherwise, if one of the reader or anyone in the room understands Hebrew, then it's going to ruin it either for everyone in the room or for himself or herself. Now, so therefore, for example, I myself and most of us cannot even possibly be Yotzei in English because I know Hebrew. So assuming you hold Hebrew as Lashon HaKodesh, you won't get into that. That was a joke. Okay, and then what's just interesting to point out that when we, for someone who's going to read a Megillah that's written only in English, and it's written in English and it's read in English, or whatever language, so the poskim point out that the words Achash Deranim B'nei Haramachim, I'm not going to try and translate that for you because we don't know how to translate that. We can guess or do our best assumption of what the correct translation is, but Chazal say that we don't have a clear 100% correct translation, and so therefore those words, those three words, must be written in Lashon HaKodesh and read in Lashon HaKodesh, even if everything else is going to be written in English, and then everything else will be read in English. And then in that case, so that person who doesn't speak Hebrew would be, or doesn't understand Hebrew, would be able to be Yotzei in such a situation. Again, we're not usually doing this, but that would be how to write in English, an English Megillah. All right. Haga, v'im k'tuba b'shnei lashonot, mishem evinim yatzu. And if it's written in two languages, then you would be Yotzei. That's assuming both people, the person who's reading and the person listening understands both languages. Let's say you want half the Megillah to be written in English and half to be written in Spanish. So then if you understand English and Spanish, then that would work. You'd be Yotzei. Now, lechatchila, the poskim say not to do it. It's a Megillah in two different languages. But mi'ikar din, you would be Yotzei. Assuming you don't understand Hebrew. Once you understand Hebrew, then that's already a big problem. Okay, let's go on. Yud Aleph. Now this is just piggybacks on everything we just learned. Yesh limchot biyad akorim l'nashim ha-megillah b'lashan la'az. So already it was mentioned in the Rishonim that one should not read the Megillah for women. It was because women knew less Hebrew than the men. That's how it was formulated. So you shouldn't read the Megillah for them. Don't get an English Megillah and read it to them in English. Even though it's written in English. Now, technically, we learned that might be a kosher reading, but what's one of the main problems is often the reader who reads to them is going to know Hebrew. If the reader knows Hebrew, then we just learned the reader won't be Yotzei, and if he's not Yotzei, no one who's listening to him can be Yotzei. And so again, it just becomes a problem.
He reads earlier for himself.
No, that's okay, because he's Mechuyev B'davar. A person can read many times over in Hebrew, even though he already was Yotzei, because he's Mechuyev B'davar, and he's doing it, for him, he's doing it correctly, he would be Yotzei.
So then he could be, afterwards...
He could be Motzi 100 times, yeah.
The women, I'm saying, in the lot.
No, only in Hebrew.
Yotzei earlier.
Yeah, but he's a person who's not capable to be Yotzei. So he can't be Motzi. It's a puzzle reading. If he knows Hebrew, even if he's already been Yotzei, his reading is a puzzle reading if he understands Hebrew. Anyways, in general, it's a problem, and I have yet to find a kosher Megillah in English anyway. Never seen one. Okay, by the way, just to point out, it seems, through the eyes of Chazal, Rishonim, and Poskim, it seems to be that Chazal, when they made this takana, that it could be written and read in any language, it was a halacha, lo lamaiseh. Chazal, I don't believe, really had this in mind. It was just in order to be more pirsum hanes, because all the story was written about letters going out in all languages for everyone, so they thought it would be a proper and, I don't want to use the word amusing, but a proper way to be mefarnes the nes in the halacha. Maybe they had a mind for unusual medinas and unusual circumstances where nobody knew any Hebrew. I don't know. But, okay. Yud bet. Kira'a mitnamne Hoya v'lo nirdam b'shena yatsa. Person who's dozing, in other words, you can call his name and he'll answer you, but he can't really think of a svara. He's not all there. He's a little bit there. He can tell you his name. Maybe he can tell you a number, but he's not holding to start giving svaras. Such a person, but he still has to be awake enough to know that he's doing a mitzvah, because mitzvah is tzrichos kavana. So in such a case, since he's not asleep, if he read the Megillah like that, he's yotzei. But if you heard it if the person listening, you go to shul and you're tired, you're listening, and you're mitnamnim, lo yatsa, you're not yotzei. Now technically you would be yotzei, but we assume for sure if you're dozing off like this, you're going to be missing it's a 30-minute reading, 20-minute reading. For sure you're going to be missing some of the words. So that's why so therefore we say lo yatsa. Because it's like a vada, you're not going to hear every word. So if you're really tired, my best recommendation would be just to stand up, splash your face. As far as drinking a cup of coffee, I don't know, for some people coffee doesn't even help, and you might end up having to leave to go to the bathroom. So anyway, you might be fasting anyway. Okay, next halacha. Now we just point out over here, you point out a couple times in this siman, Mishnah Berurah and others, that we know that here, let's read, I'll say it and read the next couple halachas. I'll just say it now because I don't want to forget, that when a person has a mind to be motzi someone else to do the mitzvah, we spoke about it yesterday, we'll mention it again, and the person listening, you only have to actively think about it before you start. And then you can just go on autopilot from then on. You don't have to be thinking as you're saying Kiddush on Shabbos, as you're davening, as you're doing the whole Megillah, constantly thinking you're having someone to be motzi, just as long as you're in the beginning. And that's why also by misnamnim, how much kavanah can a person have? So, okay. But anyways, that's what's needed. Just at the beginning. Yud Gimel. Haya kotva, a person's writing the Megillah. Shakare pasuk Megillah, shuhu ma'atik imenu. So you're writing one Megillah from another. And because in order to write a Megillah, you have to copy from another one. And as you're writing, you're saying each pasuk out loud. Now we're assuming you're reading it, when you repeat it, you read it correctly. Because there's two ways to read it. You can read it the way it's written and the way it's read. So you have to make sure that you're reading it at least once the way it's read in order to be yotzei. So, im kivein libo latzet yedei chovato, if you read it correctly, again, you can read it twice, one correct, one according to the way it's written, one according to the way it's read. But as long as you're reading it the correct way, and you have a mind to be yotzei the mitzvah, not just to be writing a Megillah. So here you right. So then vahu shetehei ktuva kula lefana b'Megillah shu ma'atik mimena. And in other words, we're assuming you're copying it from a kosher Megillah, not just a manuscript or just a printed book. It has to be a kosher Megillah. You're copying it from it. V'chein im haya magia, and so too if you are, or if you're correcting a Megillah, same thing. Right? You're using two Megillahs. You're reading from one as you're correcting the other one to compare, and you're reading it out loud correctly. So if you have kavanah, you're yotzei. V'chein im haya dorsha. So too, if you're a dorish, you read a pasuk from the Megillah, kosher. You read it out loud to be yotzei the mitzvah, and then you give a couple-minute drash on each pasuk, or 30-second drash on each pasuk. Shakori pasuk with Megillah shlema v'dorsho. Because what are you doing? Essentially, you are reading from an entire kosher Megillah, right? That's the case that we're talking about. And then you're reading the entire Megillah. Obviously, it's going to take you longer than 20, 30 minutes if you're giving a little drash. In kivein libo latzeit yidei chovato yatsa. If you had a mind to be yotzei the mitzvah as you're giving the shir, then you're yotzei. Velo yafsik ba b'inyanim acherim k'shedorsha. But you shouldn't. If you're going to be dorish, that's fine, but make it a short drush regarding the halachas of Purim, or the story of Purim, the nace of Purim. But she'asr lahafsik ba b'inyanim acherim. Don't get too fancy and show off how brilliant you are, and now start going on tangents all over Shas and other ideas that are not directly related to the Megillah. That's already that's inappropriate to be doing while you're doing the mitzvah. Okay. Yudalid. Hakari et Megillah tzarech shechavin lehotzi hashomea v'tzarech shechavin hashomea latzeit. So here we said this a couple of times. A person needs to, the reader has to have everybody in mind that he's motzi them, and all the listeners for themselves have to be have kavana that they're being yotzei mitzvah strichas kavana, and to be motzi someone else, you also have to have that kavana to be motzi other people. And even bedi eved, if a person did the mitzvahs for someone else or said it for someone else that they were listening and did not have them in mind, even bedi eved, they're not yotzei. Okay, so normally we would assume that the best is to actively have this in mind, but many times by mistake we don't. It's assumed the person is. It's obvious that the person is having other people in mind. But in cases where it's not clear, then the mitzvah does need to be repeated. Okay. And if even one word is missed from the listener, just like the reader, also they are not yotzei. V'ima korei shaliach tzibur, right? We mentioned a few, as long as it's less than 50%, obviously words can be made up from a chumash as long as it's in order. Okay, that was yesterday's shir.
To fill in.
To fill in.
Not to make it up.
But not fill in lemafreya, retroactively. Where you missed, you have to go back and then continue from then on. But yeah, that was yesterday. Okay. Now, ve'ima korei shaliach tzibur, this is along the lines of what we just said. If the shaliach tzibur mistama daito akol hashomim, afilu heim achrei beit hakneset. Now the shaliach tzibur, he's standing up at the bima. Of course he knows he's being motzi everybody else, and mistama, that's his das, just like the father or the man who gets up and says kiddush. And so therefore really mikar adin, they are yotzei, but it's always better to have even active kavana what you're doing. Right? And even a chazan who's in the shul, and the windows are open and people can hear outside the shul, the people outside the shul can also be yotzei, because the shaliach tzibur has in mind for everybody, not unless he specifically excludes people outside the shul. That would be a wrong thing to do. But he has stam kavana for everybody, and that everybody includes people out of the shul. So the people outside the shul can be yotzei if they themselves have in mind to be yotzei. If they're just walking by and they hear someone reading the Megillah and they really have no kavana, so then that they won't be yotzei. Okay. Now, really, this could be, we're going to continue reading. It could be another seif, but it's not. The new topic. Ein medaktekin b'tayotea. So, this is from the Gemara, that one does not have to be medaktek on the exact pronunciation. And that is the clear opinion of the Tur and the Rosh, based on Yerushalmi. That even if there are some small mistakes on the pronunciation, even if it changes the meaning a little bit, you're still going to be yotzei. For example, a person read, it's supposed to be yoshev, and he read yashav. You are yotzei. We just read. Ein medaktekin b'tayotea. We're not medaktek. Obviously, lachatchila, the first opinion, yeah. That's right. We're in the first opinion so far. This is the opinion of the Tur Rosh, and the Ikar opinion, certainly it would seem according to the Shulchan Aruch, and probably according to everybody on a b'diavad level. So your yotzei, if it's so normally we would correct him if he goes from yashav instead of yoshev, but if we didn't, you would be according to the first opinion, you're yotzei. And okay, or another example is nofel to nafal. Okay, but the yesh omrim opinion, that's Orach Chaim and the Ran, davka beta'ut shehalashon ve'inyan echad. Only if the mistake really doesn't make a difference at all, even from past tense to future tense. If there's no difference at all, then that's the only time you're yotzei. Otherwise, you're supposed to go back and reread. The story in the Gemara when there are two students, and chad kare Yehudim, chad kare Yehudiyim. The difference was Yehudim and Yehudiim, and both of them mean Jews. Obviously, one is the more correct way to read it than the other. V'lo hadar chad minayu, and they did not have to go back and read it. No one corrected them, and they just let it go. So on a mistake like that, you can keep quiet. You don't have to start hawking and bothering the shliach tzibor and slowing down the kriya. You can keep reading. Aval ta'ut acher, but a bigger mistake like yoshev to yashav, you're not yotze and you have to go back. And that is the lechatchila, that is the opinion of the Mishnah Berurah, to go back. Okay. Ted Vav. Tzarich lomar aseret b'nei aman v'aseret. So we know the v'aseret hakol b'nei shima achas. So the din in the Gemara is we want to say all the sons of Haman, all the 10 names, including the word aseret, in one breath. Why? Lehodia shekulam nergu v'nitlu ke'achad. To know that they were all, it's part of Persume Nisa, that they were all, and to share the story in Hakaras Satov to Kadosh Baruch Hu, that they were all killed and hung at the same time on the one pole, one on top of the other. Haga, v'davka lechatchila. Now this is only lechatchila. Aval b'diavad, im hifsik b'neim yatza. If you took a breath between every word, every name, you would still be yotze. It's just a din lechatchila in the Gemara. Ulachatchila, and then there's a minhag that's after the Gemara. It's not a ikar halacha. It's a minhag that many of us keep if we're able to. Lomar b'neshima achas mitechilat 500 ish ve'et parshandasa v'chule ad aseret. You start the one breath from not just the names themselves, but from where it starts saying 500 ish, right before. To show, this emphasizes that these 10 Bnei Aman were sarim, were ministers in charge of the 500 men that were killed. So that's, because it's all shayach to the same thing. Okay, Yud Zayin, no Ted Zayin. Sarich Shemar Arur Haman Baruch Mordechai Arur Zeresh Uberucha Esther Arurim Kol Ovdei Elilim Beruchim Kol Yisrael V'tzarich Shemar V'gam Charvona Zachur Latov. So we must say this in order to remember the nace and have proper hakaras hatov.
Is that the Sephardic minhag also to say Arurim?
Yeah, at the end.
You have that?
Yeah, but not the whole Shoshanas Yaakov necessarily. But
the Ashkenazim don't have that phrase. Arurim Kol.
You know what? I have to double check on the Nasach. Okay. Yud Zayin. Minan kol Yisrael shakori kori ufashet kigeret laharot hanes kshiyigmar chozer v'korcha kula umevarech. So the minhag of all Klal Yisrael this is for the shliach tzibur, it doesn't apply necessarily for a person who reads it in private. Of course you could, but as you're reading it, you keep unfolding it, and you're not re-rolling it as you read it, but you allow it to have a few columns fold on each other. The scroll just keeps folding on each other as opposed to re-rolling it, and that is to show that it's like a letter, to remind us of, again, part of the whole story. And then before you say the last bracha at the end, then you quickly roll it all up because it's a ganai to let it just sit like that. So we want to roll it up right away, proper kavod, and then we finish with the bracha right afterwards. And the post can just point out, just be careful when you're doing this, when you're letting it just fold on each other over and over and over again, it doesn't hang off the table, it doesn't rest on the floor, and it should just be bekavadik, just folded one on top of the other until the reading is finished, then we roll it up. Okay, now for the famous minhag we're all familiar with, and the Haggah reads, Yesh katvu shenoagim lamar arba psukim shel geula bekol ram. There's 4 psukim that talk about the geula, and it's also to show us simcha, so we say it out loud. And it's the psukim they're all familiar with. Dahainu ish Yehudi v'gomer u'mordechai yatza le'Yehudim hayta ora ki Mordechai ha'Yehudi v'chulei. And Mishnah Berurah points out that there's also a minhag to say loud the pasuk, the first pasuk in Perek Vav, B'layla hahu nadida v'chulei. And we mentioned already that some actually say the Kahal also says that as the 5th pasuk out loud. Okay, v'chein nohagim b'medinos elu, and that's how the Ramah concludes, and that is the minhag. V'achazan chozer v'korei and the chazan waits till they're finished and then rereads them out loud from the kosher Megillah. Od katvu shenagu atinakot letzur tzurat haman al eitzim ve'avanim. There's a minhag that women, kids, they engrave or write on stone or wood picture of Haman, or lichtov shem Haman aleim, or you write the name on it, and then you bring it to Shul. So when you read the Megillah and you mention his name, la'akotan zeh al zeh, and you rub them against each other, kadei shimache shmo al derech macho timcha et zercher amalek, and you try and rub away as you rub it on each other. I don't know. Maybe I'll bring a block of wood this year, write his name, and bring some sandpaper. ומזה נשתרבב המנהג שמקין המן כשקוראים המגילה בית הכנסת. And from here we have the famous minhag where we are, everyone makes a lot of noise. And there's different mixed opinions in the poskim, if it's a good minhag or not a good minhag, because it's a little disturbing. But most kehilas it's done either for all of Haman or some of Haman. And, okay.
Last time I didn't do only the first and the last.
I don't know. I think it depends on the show. I've seen both. I don't know. And fine. Bir Halacha has an interesting topic. Again, you can look it up. Which minhagim if minhagim might be a little bit not so good, should you keep the minhag going or not? Interesting topic. Here, the Rama writes, "Ve'ein levatel shum minhag o lilog alav." One should never stop, discontinue, or make fun of any minhag in Klal Yisrael, ki lo lechinam hukva'u, because even if you don't love it, it's not for no reason it wasn't established. So again, that'll be, of course, a matter of debate. Each minhag for what it is. All right, we'll save the last one for tomorrow, I think.